Good morning, students, aspirants. Today we are going to discuss about bond market. The reason being is, even though we have discussed a lot about bond market actions and all that, yesterday there was a classic event which has happened in India, specifically on the fixed income market, where the RBI has taken auction called OMO. OMO means open market operations, to the tune of 20,000 crore to infuse additional liquidity in the market. Why this has happened? And what for this has happened? What will be the impact in the bond market? What will be the impact on government securities yield or a bond yield? So what way it will have an impact on a common man, on their loans and their economy in terms of inflations and GDP, etc. That is what today we are going to see that. We all know the bond market works based on the interest rate movement. Basically, what is bond? I will repeat again for the people who are watching first time on my videos. The bond is nothing but a borrowing program. Basically, the government borrow for long term through a government securities, short term for treasury bills, right? So this borrowing will continuously happen from the government as long as we have a physical deficit. Basically, what government is trying to do, trying to borrow money from the public through a Reserve Bank of India by issuing government securities. In the latest budget, which is announced on last month, there was an announcement for huge borrowing from the government. Because of that, what is happening is the demand for money has increased. There will be a jittery in the bond market. The bond market as such, it is not comfortable. The yield has gone up from 5.97 to 6%, 6% to 6.03, 6.03 to 6.07%. That is the highest on yesterday's afternoon. Because of that increase in yield, what will happen is there is a liquidity crunch in the market. So the liquidity crunch, which gives a negative signals in the market, there is a huge demand for money. Normally the government borrows the huge amount of money to the tune of 2 lakhs crore or 3 lakhs crore based on the requirement. So in the process, what is happening is the bond market liquidity is going down because the government is trying to borrow or suck money from the system. The yield does increases. We all know the bond market works on the bond theorem. That means the bond value is inversely proportional to interest rate movement. What it means, when the interest rate goes up, bond value comes down, right? On account of huge borrowing or the planned borrowing by the government, the demand for money in the market or the bond value has come down because of the borrowing, and then the yield is increases. I will give you a little more in-depth details about that. How the government borrows? The government borrows money by way of issuing fresh bond in the market. So when they issue a fresh bond, what will happen is lot of money flow into that by buying a bond. So in the process, the money flow will not move into the economy, it will move back to that bond. So in the process, the yield increases, bond value comes down. That gives little bit of jittery in the bond market liquidity or in the system, banking system. To support the banking system liquidity, what RBI has done is, RBI has initiated the operation called open market operation. What is open market operation? We call it in short form, it's called OMO. This is an indirect instrument of monetary policy to contain inflation or stimulate growth. Basically, open market operation is an indirect instrument which will infuse liquidity or suck liquidity from the market. By doing that, what RBI has done is infuses more liquidity by way of purchasing or selling government securities. When the RBI purchases government securities, what will happen? The people will get money. When RBI sells government securities to the bank, what will happen? The bank will pay money and buy government securities. By doing purchasing and selling of government securities, RBI can infuse or suck liquidity from the banking system. Yesterday 20,000 crore worth of OMO which has happened in the banking system through a banking system. In the process, the RBI increases the funds availability in the banking system. That means RBI infuses the liquidity by way of purchasing more government securities from the banking system and pay cash to the banking system in layman point of view. So in the process, what will happen is the banking system has got more funds. When the liquidity increases, the bond yield has comes down from 6.07% to 6.03%. In the process of doing this OMO, the yield has come down. When the yield comes down, the bond value goes up. As I told you earlier, the bond value and the yield are inversely proportional. In the process of OMO, the RBI has given certain level of comforts to the banking system. In the process, the liquidity is improved, and whatever the borrowing which has happened through government or central government which they are planning to do a borrowing from the market, that will be get facilitated, or there will not be any fear factor in the banking liquidity. Basically what will happen is whenever the government announces the huge borrowing, that means the government is going to spend that much of money in the infrastructure system and the economy will move up based on the spending which is happening by the government of India. This will have a cascading effect. It's not that just government is borrowing. When the government borrowing and spending in the market, that is a signal for private sectors also to improve the production capacity, to expand and go for the development of new projects, capacity, production, manufacturing facilities, etc. So in the process, what will happen is this private sector also start borrowing money from the banking system. So this will be a rollover effect or a cascading effect. The moment the government announces that borrowing, and then the bond yield will react, and then private sector also plan for additional borrowing. This will all create some kind of a liquidity crunch in the banking system. To support banking system, the RBI announced OMO. OMO is nothing but indirect instrument of monetary policy which will support or infuse or sucks liquidity from the banking system. So the OMO is an indirect instrument which RBI announced to the tune of 20,000 crore. It's not only that, RBI has said that there will be a sequence of OMO which will happen probably after a quarter or after 6 months based on the borrowing level of the government and how the demand for the loans or the credit growth happens in the banking system. This is overall good for the economy because the more borrowing from the government will put their money in the infrastructure project, the GDP grows. Right? The overall is good, nothing to worry about the banking system or the bond market which has happened on the yesterday's event. This is all good for the banking system. The OMO, which is an indirect instrument which RBI facilitate, the banking system has got more liquidity. Thank you so much.